Good afternoon, everyone, or evening, maybe, depending on where you are. I finally got myself in the right spot. I kept getting my dates kerfluiated, and thankfully, Max, who's behind the scenes on all this stuff, corrected me a number of times so that I wasn't sitting here waiting to go live on a day when we weren't actually live. But today is the day. We're all cooking at the same time here. So. Couple different things. One, thanks to Tight Bond for sponsoring this and keeping this a free event for all of you. And then two, it is summertime, which means what a great time of year to sit outside, in Wisconsin and in this part of the world, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois. The winter months are so long, we really savor these outdoor times. So one of the things we're doing for you there is providing the Adirondack chair plans, which if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see DIY Adirondack chair. And that's a video that I did a bunch of years ago, and I have built like 11 billion of those Adirondack chairs. There are a couple things I really like about them. The design is there's a scoop, there's a curve in the seat. So when you sit in it, there's actually a spot for your butt to go. There's a curve in there for your butt. And then the back is also curved. And if you look at, I don't know, if you just go to some like a big box store and you look at Adirondack chairs, when you stand back, they all kind of look similar because they're an Adirondack chair. But when you look at them closely, if from where your knees are draped over the seat to the back, it's a straight line. And if the back itself is a straight line, it's angled back, but across the slats, it's straight. Go ahead and sit in one of those. They're not that comfortable because your back isn't straight and your butt isn't straight. So when you're sitting in something that doesn't have some contours to it, it's not very comfortable. If you want to be able to take a nap in an Adirondack chair, which, big wide arm, room for a gin and tonic, resting comfortably in the sun or the shade, great place for a nap. That's one of the things I really like about this Adirondack chair design is that compound curve aspect, a spot for your butt, a spot for your back. And what's neat with this particular plan is that it's got full-size templates. So when you get this PDF, you can take the PDF to like a Kinko's where they can print large format, and they can print for you paper templates that give you on the leg where there are a number of curves in it, the slat that creates the curve for the back, the arms have a funky curve to them. They can give you all of that printed on full-size paper templates. So we're not asking you to, look at squares and transpose this into a bigger scale. We're giving it to you full scale. So that's a pretty cool aspect of it. So anyway, scroll down a little bit, look at those plans and click that, and you can download that for free. And you have plenty of summer left in which to build that. Speaking of plenty of summer left for stuff, earlier today, I did a live stream in which I made a planter. And it's a planter that I actually did a couple of months ago, but there was something kerflooey with the internet that day. And the video from that came out really, really badly. So we elected to do that again. So Max can throw the link in the chat. While you're getting material for that Adirondack chair, go ahead and get a little extra material. The planter box comes out of two 8-foot 1x6s. So dimensional lumber, very easy to get. And he can he can provide the link for you to that planter that I did earlier today so that you can take advantage of that as well and get another summer related project going. Still plenty of time to fill that thing with dirt and get plants in it. The planter, not the Adirondack chair, and get some plants going. And one of the things I mentioned on that live stream is that what a great project to do with kids. The planter is pretty simple overall, and it involves some cross cuts. There are a couple rips that get done on the table saw, which an adult could do. But when it comes to assembly, it goes together real easy. You'll see that in the video. So pretty cool to get kids involved with building the planters. And now you've got a planter you can put plants in. So have them plant a tomato or some rutabagas or some beets. Ugh, who eats rutabagas or beets? Or some carrots or whatever, and get them invested in that whole gardening aspect too. Lots, I think, of cool stuff going on there. Okay, I shall launch, even though it's not launch time. That was at noon. Mike says, when you're using a bushing with a router bit, what is the simplest way to account for offset edge between bushing and bit with the template? All right, great question. So let me get, if you're not familiar, this is a bushing or guide bushing or template guide bushing. Different names, all the same stuff. For years in my early woodworking, not that long ago, these were commonly called Porter cable style guide bushings because they're the ones that were first using this in conjunction with their dovetail jig. This goes into the base of your router. You have to have a base on your router that accepts these. So it'll go into kind of a counter bore in the plastic base, and then this is going to go over the top, fasten it in place. Once it's in, this shoulder can trace stuff. So you can imagine if you had fingers on a dovetail jig, that shoulder can trace those fingers. And with a router bit sticking out, you're going to make a cut. Now, this is similar to work that we could do with a pattern style router bit. So let me just get, only take me a momentito, because I know right where it is. This is a huge one, but it'll make the point. This is a pattern style router bit. Ball bearing on top, same diameter as the cutter. So that's the key difference here. These two are the same diameter. So when you're talking about doing template work, a really easy way to get 11 billion parts that are all identical is to first make a template, cut the material slightly oversized, and then use a router to finish it. So with this, the template and the finished component can be exactly the same size. With a guide bushing, what you'll want to know when you buy this is the OD, the outside diameter of the guide bushing. And then with your router bit, you're going to want to know, which you will know, the OD. I'm just grabbing a bit for you. You'll know the OD of your router bit. So now when these two play nice together, it's going to look something like this. Let me get where the light isn't so glaring. This is a 1/4 inch bit. Let's say this is a 1/2 inch guide bushing. So all we need to know, the math is relatively simple. If this is a 1/2 inch outside diameter and this is a 1/4 inch outside diameter, there's a 1/4 inch difference between the two. The 1/8 inch, so you need to accommodate an 1/8 inch offset when you create your template. So in all honesty, for me, if I'm going to do this kind of stuff, whenever I can, I'm going to default to a pattern style bit instead, or a flush trim bit. So the difference between a pattern style and a flush trim is that this is a pattern bit because the ball bearing is between the shank and the cutter. If it was a flush trim bit, the ball bearing would be on this end. But the beauty of a flush trim or a pattern bit is that you don't have to make any accommodation in your template. The downside is, I was looking to see, I had a template laying there, I put it away though. The downside is if you need to do any kind of a plunge, cut, exit, you really can't do that with either of those bits because they may not be in contact with the template when you do it. that's where a guide bushing is going to be handier for template work, because this can be in a groove in the pattern. With a plunge router, you could plunge in, make your cut, exit, whoops, that'll stay, exit, and that'll work better. So the math is outside diameter of the guide bushing, outside diameter of the router bit, the difference, half the difference between the two is the offset in your template. And the guide bushings are available in lots of different sizes. So you want to match that up. That's, I'm not sure, probably a 1 inch, maybe a 1 1/8 inch guide bushing, down to that one is maybe 3/8 or so. So we of course don't want the router bit to have any opportunity to rub on the inside of the guide bushing. So you want to match diameter of guide bushing to router bit. And it's easiest if you work in whole numbers. Like if this is a half and that's a quarter, the math is really simple. So you want to kind of pay attention to that too as you're matching up guide bushing and router bit. Mike says, is there a standard or best practice for installing drawer pulls or cabinet door handles from the top of the drawer or cabinet door? So I don't know about like industry standard. I can tell you what I do. And you can, I guess, take it or leave it. I was just looking back here at drawers. So I've got those. Or we could look at, yeah. The drawers on my workbench can give us an example. So this will take a second of adjustment or so. So it's pretty common for me to locate a pull 2/3 of the way up from the bottom of the drawer. So 6-inch drawer, this would be centered on 4 inches. 6-inch drawer front, this would be centered on 4 inches. I use that a lot. And then there's an it depends. So let me just, I think from here I can do a zoom. Way back there. Except there's a sewing machine in the way. Quit moving. All right, let me move this. So on those, because the cabinet is low, I've got the pulls up high so that they're easy to get to. If I did my 2/3 thing, it would have the pull way down here and it would just be harder to get at. So in this case, they're probably like 1.5 inches, same distance from the edge over and from the top down. On a wall cabinet, so I'll give you another zoom on that one. Now you're seeing traditional archery corner. On a wall cabinet like this, depends on how high the cabinet is going to hang. If this was a conventional kitchen cabinet and I did this, it would be too high. So then just like I talked about on the last one, I'd be centered down here someplace. Maybe down here, 2/3 down. This one is centered on the door. So you'd have to see if 2/3 down was reachable, but more likely on a kitchen cabinet, I'd be centered on this corner down here with that pull. So a thing to do is, like, before you commit, just put a piece of masking tape on the thing where you think you're going to put the pull and see if you like how that looks. That'll give you a visual before you go punching holes in the piece. Where am I? David says, I have a new set of wood chisels from Czechoslovakia. No instructions included. Could you give a quick overview of correct sharpening and maintenance steps? Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen bench chisels come with sharpening instructions. Let me think a second. Yes is the short answer. I'm just trying to think of where I have stuff. We can go about 11 billion different routes with this. Hang on. So one of my favorite ways to sharpen chisels is with a work sharp. This is currently configured to sharpen knives and scissors out here. But when I change plates on that, I can just talk you through what happens. And we've got, if you go on WWGOA.com and you just search chisel sharpening, you're going to see this in action. So when I use this to sharpen a chisel, this assembly comes off, a disc goes on here, the abrasive on the disc is down. This table right here is where the chisels go. I can change the angle on that table so I can control the angle on the chisel. So again, imagine this is gone. There's a disc on here with abrasive on it. When this is running and I come up underneath it, the bevel on the chisel is being sharpened on the underside of that disc. It's a really, really easy way to sharpen because the angle is established here. All you have to do is, and you're going to be sharpening, like I said, you'll be on the abrasive on the bottom of that disc. So it's a very, very simple way to sharpen bench chisels, very, very effective. Alternatively, let's stay right there on the bench. If you want to do it by hand, I would recommend, I really like diamond stones. They're expensive, but with diamond stones, they don't wear. So if you get a silicon carbide stone, it's possible that you can trough it. You can take it out of flat. And if you do, then it's no good for a plane iron or a bench chisel or almost anything because it's not flat. So with diamonds, they're the hardest sharpening surface we can get. You're going to buy this once in your life. You will never buy another sharpening stone. Along with it, I would get a sharpening guide. And that's what this is. So that is, the way that works is I can grab the chisel in the sharpening guide. And then generally, I don't have it in front of me, but there would be paperwork with this that says, allow that project out some distance. Maybe it's 20 millimeters, maybe it's 3/4 of an inch, whatever, if they're metric or SAE. Once I know that, the benefit to that guide is, like we talked about with the work sharp, is once I'm sticking out the right amount, I rest that on my stone and I don't want to touch because I don't think I have the right angle. Then you just go back and forth. And again, you can't mess up the angle because it's established by this. I don't use, I don't know, my bench chisels get used and sharpened, but not like weekly. So the mechanical repeatability for me of simply putting the bevel on the whetstone and sharpening like this isn't great. I don't I haven't established that muscle memory because I don't do it that often. So the work sharp or a guide like this is a great way to go to make sure that every time you sharpen this chisel, you're getting it at the exact same angle, and that's critical. If you get a diamond stone, they need to be lubricated, and that can be lapping fluid, which is diamond stone specific fluid that maybe comes with the stone. Some of the stones just use water. Read the owner's manual for the stone, and that'll tell you which one. So those are my two faves because they're pretty simple. And between them, clearly, I mean, the work sharp is what I use most commonly. And I'll follow up with the follow up on sharpening the bevel. Is that's probably going to kick a burr up on the back. So then you lap the back, which is just doing this on a very, very, very fine stone, just enough to take that off. You want to look at it and see, let me see if I can show you an example. Some chisels are ground and not honed. Yeah, I don't have a good example here. If you can see what looks like sandpaper marks in the bevel of the chisel, that was ground to shape. It was not honed. So it's going to need quite a bit of honing. You got to get those marks out. It should almost be sneaking up on a mirror finish on that bevel before that chisel is ready to use, along with the lapping that you would do on the back. A higher end chisel, more expensive chisel, they're closer to the hone step when you first get them. David says, making a custom table is adding a breadboard to each end a highly recommended option? If so, what's the best method to attach it? If you have a tutorial already, then please disregard and I'll go find it. So breadboard ends are a very misunderstood, or in many cases, misunderstood woodworking technique. So is it recommended? Not necessarily. You know, it's an aesthetic that you can choose to do or not. If you glue anything up, a tabletop or a door panel or whatever it is, if you bring the material, if the material has been properly dried, to acclimate to your shop environment, you do a good glue up, that thing that you glued up should stay flat no matter what. So part of the premise with the breadboard end is people thinking that it's a must-have in order to keep a big tabletop flat, which is not the case. If you do a good job gluing everything up, your table is going to stay flat. One thing that some people like about it is the aesthetic of the breadboard is covering the end grain. So if you don't like how end grain looks, maybe you think the breadboard end looks better. The thing that really gets kerfluated on this kind of thing is that the breadboard, you're putting a long grain breadboard against the end grain. You cannot glue them together. Very commonly, it's a tongue and groove joint that gets used for that. And if there's glue, it's only applied to the very center section where the breadboard and the table panel come together. More commonly on something like a big wide tabletop, you would probably use pins and then slots. So pins and slots being in the breadboard end, if you're going to use a 1/4 inch dowel as a pin, you drill a 1/4 inch hole. But in the tongue, which is on the end of your table, you make a slot that's a 1/4 inch wide, but maybe a 1/2 inch long. And that's going to allow the field, the top, to move independently of the breadboard end. The thing to understand with that is that one time a year, it's like a clock that stopped and is right twice a day. One time a year, the breadboard end and the edges of the table field will be flush. The rest of the year, they will not. So scenario A, if I build that whole thing in August when the humidity is high, in January when the humidity goes down, the tabletop, the field will shrink, the breadboard end will not. So depending on your width, you could have an 1/8 or 1/4 inch step between the breadboard end and the field. Or if I build it in the winter, it'll be just the opposite. Come August, the field will extend past the breadboard end when the humidity is really high. I have bedside tables, I think they're only 16 inches deep, and it's a measurable step in the wintertime because there was a summer project. It's a measurable step on both edges when I have that difference in the wintertime when I have that difference. So there are a variety of ways to do it, but at the end of the day, it's commonly a tongue and groove joint. It's a tongue and groove joint that has to be allowed to float so that the field, the tabletop, can expand and contract independently of the breadboard end. Clay gave a exclamation point mark to gin and tonic followed by a nap. That's, yes, always a good idea. Hondo says, can you tell us when a table saw sled would best be used and procedure? Well, there's probably as many table saw sleds as there are table saws, and they have them for different applications, unless you mean like a panel sled. So I can show you my panel sled. Get you going in this direction. Where am I? Oops. I invariably zoom the wrong way on the first try. Camera's a little crooked, but I'm not going to fuss with it at this second. So my sled, my crosscut sled is simple, but effective. MDF. I like MDF for this because it stays stable, stays flat. This is an Incra product. It's an Incra miter gauge bar. That's probably not the official name, but the company is Incra, I-N-C-R-A. And it's aluminum, and then it's got expansion devices in it so that on this side where these holes are, when this is in the miter gauge slot, come on, I can finesse the fit. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Oh, dust on the miter gauge sled, or on the crosscut sled. When it's in this position in the miter gauge slot, I can turn a screw that expands or contracts that bar to customize the fit so I can take the wiggle out of it. So the way this one works, just getting the fit to go there. The way this works is that the fence is on that end. If I'm cross-cutting, my material goes up against that fence. I hold it thusly, and I push it past. I'm going to run into the anti-kickback pawl there, so I can't continue. But I just push that past the blade, and that basically, it's a really, really big miter gauge. It's maybe a little bit more common that people have a sled that captures in both miter gauge slots, and the whole sled moves thusly. I've actually got a sliding crosscut table on my table saw. That's what this black part is. There's a fence that goes on there, and that's how I do big crosscuts. So this doesn't get used often in my shop, and that's why I don't have the other. I don't need to make the other style of sled because I do my big crosscuts with this. But in any case, with this one, that's how it works. The fence, you make the whole base, And then when the fence goes on, one fastener there, the fastener on this end is in an oversized hole. So then what I can do is make a test cut, see if I'm square. If I'm not, I can loosen that fastener that's in an oversized hole, adjust the fence a little bit, tighten it, another test cut. And I keep doing that until that's giving me a square cut. Then another screw, screw, screw to lock it in place. So that's how I got this to a point where it was cutting squarely. Michael says, well, very nice. I sure would like to meet you in person, George. Your knowledge about woodworking is awesome. Well, whoops, who forgot to move the camera? That would be me. So maybe my woodworking knowledge is awesome, but my camera knowledge, not so much. Thank you, first. Secondly, there are opportunities for this. I will be at the AWFS show in Las Vegas, the woodworking show in Las Vegas, in July for the first 2 days of the show. Be walking around the floor looking for stuff, looking for cool new products. I'm teaching at the Denver Rockler store, July, I got to think a second, July 20th, Thursday, July 20th. I'm teaching at the Denver Rockler store. This coming Saturday, I have an open house here at my shop. Meet the makers. There'll be a bunch of people doing demonstrations, including me. That's 9 to 3 at my shop in Hammond, Wisconsin. And you don't have to, if you're coming, you don't have to let me know. All you have to do is show up. So there's that. And then it's not uncommon that I teach for Rockler in different stores. So across the country. So maybe we'll cross paths. Kevin says, bandsaw question. I cut some wet wood with my bandsaw. Now I have wood sap on my rubber tires. What is the best way to remove sap and goo without messing up the rubber? Great question. So with bandsaws in particular, if you look below the bandsaw table, this little triangle gets formed where the blade comes down and then the lower wheel is like this. And it's this perfect spot for stuff to get captured. So really with any resinous wood, pine is an example, cherry is an example, you're gonna probably get buildup on the lower wheel. If with wet stuff, that tends to stick to the blade a little bit more, probably travels to the upper wheel. And this is why bandsaws commonly have brushes on the lower wheel, is to knock that stuff off. So for cleaning, you have to be careful because the tires are probably either rubber or polyurethane. And the last thing you want to do is put a solvent on there that will dissolve them. Don't use lacquer thinner. That's too strong a solvent. So in my experience, first, what I would do is take the blade off, and then you can use something like a putty knife, not a chisel, to gently try to get some of the high spots off. So I'm very conservatively talking through that because you don't want to cut into the tires. So a wood chisel is not a good choice. Even with a putty knife, you want to be careful to make sure that you don't take off rubber or polyurethane. Once you've got the bulk of stuff removed, I've had great luck with just mineral spirits. And mineral spirits on a rag, wipe that down. Overall, mineral spirits, paint thinner, is a pretty benign solvent. And it's not going to take the paint off your bandsaw. It's not going to dissolve the rubber tires. It means maybe a little bit more elbow grease because it's not as strong a solvent. So you might have to rub a little harder, work a little harder to get the schmutz to come off of the tires. But over time, it'll do it. And then an interesting trick to help prevent that from happening in the future, is Armor All, the same stuff you maybe use on the vinyl dashboard in your car, is a great sealer for bandsaw tires. So you can spritz Armor All on there, and then it's going to provide, to some extent, a non-stick or a less stick coating, so that in the future, when you cut wet wood or this resinous stuff like I talked about, pine and cherry, that it has less propensity to stick to the tire than it would if they were just raw and not sealed. Sometimes when I say that, the question comes up, so I'll head it off at the pass, which is, doesn't the Armor All leave it slippery, and then the bandsaw blade's not gonna, it's gonna slip out when you're trying to make a cut? And the answer is no. There's just so much tension between a bandsaw blade and a tire that when it's in place, when the bandsaw blade is in place on the tire, there's so much bind between the two that it's pretty impossible for that to slip because there's Armor All on there. So don't worry about that. A little more than halfway through. So a couple things. One, again, thanks to, where am I? Tight Bond for always sponsoring the live streams. That's very, very good of them to do it. And we're in a long history with them doing that. I don't know, year 5, year 6, year 7, with Tight Bond as a sponsor for this. So that's crazy cool. And then 2, I talked, I mentioned the gin and tonic comment, which came from the Adirondack chair comment, which came from, we're giving you an Adirondack chair plan. So just down a little bit on the page, it'll say DIY Adirondack chair. And when you click on that, you'll be able to download a plan for an Adirondack chair. And because I hit on this heavy when I started, I'll hit on it briefly now, only briefly. 1, it's a cool design because there's a curve for your butt and a curve for your back. It's a very comfortable chair. 2, that plan includes full-size patterns. So you can take that to a place like Kinko's, have them print them on a large format printer, and go home with full-size patterns for the curvy arms, the curvy supports, the curvy legs. So it really simplifies putting those chairs together. I have built many of those Adirondack chairs. They're very, very comfortable. Great place for a nap. Michael says, does anyone know where I can purchase a replacement drive pulley for a Craftsman 12-inch bandsaw? Or then the next one, he said, I need the driven pulley. So does that mean you need the pulley on the bandsaw? So with that, I'm wondering, I would say it's not, I don't think it's uber likely that Craftsman, back in the day, they special ordered a metric pulley or something. You know what I mean? So I would say if you measure whatever pulley you're looking for, you want the inside of the pulley because it's got to fit on a shaft, and then the outside diameter where the belt goes, and the outside diameter of the pulley itself, and then the width of the V. And I wonder if you can't just find that on Amazon, a pulley. It doesn't have to be a Craftsman pulley if you can find the same size. I have had, and I did a little write-up on this for GOA, I've had great luck with the letter, replacement parts. So replacement is one word, parts, just Google it. I've got a very old Bosch bandsaw that I had to replace the graphite platen on. So the platen was fine, but that graphite protector went away. And I couldn't believe it. They had it. So you can go on there, and if you've got the model number off the bandsaw, you can search on there for by model number for parts. And for my sander, it had an exploded diagram and everything that gave me the part number. I ordered it, and a couple days later it was here. So Max put the link up from the planter box that I did this morning. That's in the chat roll. Walter says, is there a video feed or just a chat box? Are we not video-y? Hang on. So on my iPad, I'm pressing the play button. Are you getting video, Max? Like, are we sending out video? So on my iPad, I'm pressing the play button on the screen, and I'm not getting video. There should be video. So Walter, I don't know what's cooking there. That's there should always be video with this. If if I just showed you a bunch of stuff there was no video for, that's not very worthwhile. Clay says, can you only use straight router bits with a bushing, or can you use a round bottom type? So yeah, no, you could use whatever router bit you want. So let's say if you're using the guide bushing and a core box bit to put fluting in a piece of molding, that's fine. And the math will be the same. Paul says, can you tell me what's better, upcut or downcut bit for cutting patterns? I've got both in my shop, and I've got like probably 11 billion upcut bits and a few downcut bits. So I don't use the downcut all that often. If what you're cutting, it's not really about the pattern portion, it's about what it is you're cutting. If the thing you're cutting has a fragile surface on it, like I had here a piece of bird's eye maple veneer over a substrate. If you're cutting something like that, you want a downcut, because an upcut might lift the veneer a little bit and chip it, where a downcut is going to help protect the top surface. If you're not worried about protecting that top surface, an upcut is better at excavating chips out of the cut so it keeps it clear. So that's for most of what I do. I'm not working with those fragile surfaces most of the time, so I'm not worried about a downcut for that. So an upcut, it works fine for me. Mike says, are you happy with the Delta compound miter saw, which is right over there? Does it perform well compared with other brands you've owned or used? Yeah, so that's been in here a long time. And I'm very happy with it. It's accurate. The dust collection on it is good. And accurate from, I set it at 90 and then I'm toggling over to 45 and 30 and back to 90 and whatever. And it's the Delta Cruiser. Yeah, it's done well for me. Ralph says, can you sharpen wood turning chisels with diamond sharpening stones? You can. And then kind of the downside of that is just it's slow. So where with a bench chisel, even if you're actively using your bench chisels, you're going to go quite a ways in between sharpenings. With lathe chisels on one project, if I'm turning a maple bowl, I could sharpen my bowl gouge a bunch of times in the course of that one project. So for me, standing here with a diamond stone or any whetstone and sharpening a bowl gouge would kind of make me crazy because it would be slow. It works, but it would be slow. So the answer is yes. It's just not maybe the very best way to do it. Mike says, do you use a micro bevel on chisels and plane irons, or is it only necessary for certain applications? So I pretty much always put a micro bevel on, and part of that is because I'm lazy. So if there's a micro bevel on the chisel, when you go to resharpen, you don't have to make contact with the entire bevel. You only need to make contact with the micro bevel. So you're removing less material. Additionally, it gives you, it's not really like a sharper edge, because either way they're sharp. It maybe gives you a pointier edge. Is that better phrasing? So the long bevel gives you support. The micro bevel gives you a little bit keener edge, which probably makes that chisel execute just a little bit better. So yes, I do, for those two reasons, I do typically micro bevel. Chuck says, what about aftermarket fences for a Grizzly sliding table saw? Original is not very good. Yeah, I don't know. That's, yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the product. Tope says, how do I prevent my Incra miter gauge from rocking? I've adjusted the bar but can't get it to fit. I would call Incra. I don't know. I've got an Incra miter gauge on this table saw. I can't remember which model it is, and it's a perfect fit for the saw stop. With having made the adjustments, there is zero slop in it. So I would check with the manufacturer. Myron says, shop stool, wheeled or fixed? Well, this one's fixed. I don't know. You know, I've looked at wheeled shop stools. I honestly, kind of outside of the live streams, I don't spend much time sitting in my shop. When I'm coming in here to woodwork, I'm on my feet the whole, I mean, it's whatever it is, 8 or 10 or 12 hours I'm doing stuff. I'm on my feet because I just don't see scenarios for me where I can sit down and do what I'm doing, whether it's standing at my sanding table, sanding, or whatever I'm doing. I just do it standing. So for me, the fixed stools work because if I am doing something where I'm sitting, I don't know, I guess if I were sitting here trying to carve a spoon, that might be a sitting thing. And I don't want to be on wheels. I don't need to be on wheels then. This statistic of 1 says fixed base stools are fine, but I'm sure I could be disproven on that. Olin says best way to route a circle in Lexan. So Lexan is polycarbonate. It's a form of plexiglass, and the best bit for that is what's called an O flute, the letter O, flute, like a musical instrument. O flute bits only have a single helix in them. They don't have 2 flutes, it's a single flute. They're very specifically designed for plastics, non-ferrous metals, that kind of stuff. So once you're to that point, you could then create a jig for the router. I'm just trying to think through how I would do this. If you can drill a hole in the center of the Lexan, that would be the easiest way to do it, because then you could mount the jig in that hole, have a sacrificial board below it, like a piece of MDF, so that you can fix the pivot point to the MDF and then route all the way through on the perimeter. That would be a very simple way. Alternatively, for the pivot point, I don't know. I would have to stew on that. Because you can't just screw into Lexan like you can screw into a piece of wood. But a through hole in the middle with a sacrificial board below would be the easiest way to do it. Jim says, I'm having trouble finding de-waxed shellac locally. I seem to remember somebody giving a formula for linseed oil and something else to achieve the same results. True or false? Ooh, I don't know. I'm not a huge finishing guy, so that's my first disqualifier from this question. I feel intuitively like linseed oil would not give you the same sealing properties that de-waxed shellac would, but I could be wrong on that. Are you looking for just seal coat, Zinsser seal coat? Because that's de-waxed shellac. It's a 1 pound cut of de-waxed shellac. And the last time I bought it on Amazon. So, and then the time before that, I bought it at a home center. So I haven't had a hard time finding seal coat. So I would first, if you're specifically looking for de-waxed shellac and struggling, switch your search to the product seal coat. And like I said, Amazon had it a month ago. And prior to that, my home center had it. And then go from there. So Max says we're getting video. So yeah. All right, that's good. Somebody, I think I went over the question. Did somebody ask about finish on an end grain cutting board? Oh, there it is. Yeah, I scrolled past it. David says, what finish do you recommend for cutting boards? I'll show you. So this is new for me. I'll show you what I got. I watch other woodworkers' videos because there's plenty for me to learn. So a friend of mine, Mark Spagnolo, who is the wood whisperer, he not too long ago did a test on cutting oil finishes, and I don't know, I think he had 4 and only 2 kind of stuck in my brain. One was mineral oil, because I've used that for years, and then the other was tung oil. In the end, his results were that tung oil provided a much longer lasting finish than mineral oil did. And everything he said about the science of that made sense to me. So there's a key to this. I got this on Amazon. This is pure tung oil. And it's, you don't just want tung oil, you want pure tung oil. So you really want to look for those keywords. So I don't know, a number of cutting boards ago, as soon as I got that information from Mark, I switched to that tung oil, and I do like it better than mineral oil. It applies a little bit better. So just all around, and it's, now that I think about it, cutting board I have here at the shop and the one I have at the house have that on it, and they still look great a bunch of months later with pretty much daily use. So that pure tung oil has become my finish of choice for cutting boards. All right, Gerald says, I need a biscuit joiner, but don't have the $200 DeWalt and Porter Cable get for theirs. Would it be worth my while to get a Wen? They're only about $50, or would it just be frustrating myself and fork out extra money in the end? Boy, it's an interesting question. And I always struggle with this because I am an advocate, and not just in woodworking, but like, I don't know, in my archery, I ride a bicycle a lot, I ride a motorcycle, and stuff I do, I try to buy once, cry once. So I try to save my pennies and get something that I know is going to serve me well. But the other side of that is, if I'm only doing, guitar playing is a great example. People have asked me for acoustic guitar recommendations for like a kid. Well, is a kid going to take it seriously? You can go to Walmart and you can buy a $150 guitar. The action of the strings is going to be really high. It's not going to be fun to play. It's not going to have a great tone. If you spend a lot of money on a guitar, it's going to sound better. It's going to play easier. It's going to have a better action. But maybe you're investing in something that that person is not going to continue with. So the answer to all that is, I don't know. Mostly I advocate the buy once, cry once concept. So I've never used it. My very first router was a Wen router. I was 12 years old when it was given to me. So that was 50 years ago. It worked okay until it didn't. I've never used the Wen biscuit joiner. The other way to, so my answer to that is, I don't know. The other way you can do biscuits is that is the right size slot cutter for biscuits. So it looks just like this, because that is one. See on there it says BIS, that stands for biscuit. So this is the right height. It creates a slot that's the right thickness for a biscuit. What it's not doing is giving you, it's not limiting the length of the biscuit left to right the way a biscuit cutter would give you that exact perfect football shape. I don't think that's a big deal. I think this is an effective way to go. So the easiest way to do this is put it in a router table, and then with the fence in place, you can plunge your work against this cutter and make a biscuit slot. So if you've already got a router bit table for the cost of a router bit, which maybe this is also a $50 router bit, but I kind of think this might give you better results than an inexpensive, like if the biscuit joiner is that inexpensive, does the fence have play in it? Is it hard to adjust? Is it going to be an uber struggle to get it to do what you want it to do? I don't know. One would be maybe poll other woodworkers, see what they say, but take into consideration the concept that you can use a slot cutter that is dimensioned for biscuits in order to create slots for biscuits. Terry says, after a couple years on a tabletop, the glue line is showing under the polyurethane finish. Any idea why? Boy, no. Yeah, I don't know what's cooking there. Clay weighs in. Tung oil products, I'm assuming this is about the cutting board. Tung oil products, and like Odie's, is long lasting. Steve asks, what varnish did you use on the wood strip canoe? And that's so cute that you're proactively thinking, I already used the varnish. The canoe is still a work in progress. Don't go away. I'm coming right back. This is a visual. I'm not sitting there, but I'm still here. Coming right back. Here we go. Almost there. So the stuff, I'm kind of timing it with my steps, that is going to go on the canoe is this. Total Boat Gleam. So a couple things are interesting about this whole process. I used the correct two-part epoxy, Total Boat High Performance Epoxy, on the canoe. Those products alone do not have UV resistance to it. So that leaves the canoe waterproof. At that point, I could go canoeing. But when it sits in the sun, it's going to actually degrade that epoxy. The UV is going to degrade that epoxy. So the very last step is you lightly sand everything to give this product some tooth, and then you reseal all the epoxy that you've put on with Gleam. And that Gleam is going to give it the UV protection. This isn't just for canoes. If you're looking for a crazy, amazing exterior, basically a varnish type finish, this is a really, really amazing product to put on your outdoor projects. So that's what, when I get to that step, that's what's going to go on the canoe, inside and out, because the whole thing is going to see the sun. All right, well, I think we're there. So again, a couple things. Thank you, Tight Bond. Dos. Don't forget to grab that Adirondack chair plan, 3 or 4, wherever I'm at here. In July, like a month from now, July 20th or so, I'll be teaching live edge slab stuff at the Denver Rockler store. So there will be 2 classes there that day. Check with the store on exactly what's going on. Open house here at my shop this Saturday, June 17th. You're welcome to stop in for that, 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. There'll be about 6 different demonstrations, not just me, a bunch of other people demonstrating all day long. So that's going on. And then AWFS, the big woodworking show, is coming up in July. I'll be at that the first couple of days. That's a pretty cool event. All the usual suspects in the woodworking world will be there, showing off their cool new stuff. So that gets us to 5 o'clock. Thanks to Max, who's on the boards, making sure we stay live. And I will see you folks the next time we do this.